And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Tuesday, July 31st, 2012. The Communist Revolution in the USA. That's my topic today. Dr. Paul Kengor will be here in several minutes to discuss his new book, The Communist, the untold story of Barack Obama's mentor, Frank Marshall Davis. Later in the program, retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, a member of the 1st Delta Team and former commander of the Green Berets, will talk about Barry Soetoro's communist agenda. Somebody else who's talking about Obama's real intentions is a man who served along with Obama as a professor at the University of Chicago in the 1990s. Professor John Lott is the author of the book More Guns, Less Crime. Obviously, he's a strong supporter of the right of citizens to bear arms for their protection. He told radio host Laura Ingraham that he and Obama knew each other for about 4 years as professors. Professor Lott said the first time he met Professor Obama, the future president said to him, "Oh, you're the gun guy. I don't believe people should be able to own guns." When asked by the radio host if Mr. Obama was referring to criminals, Professor Lott said, "Oh, no, it was very clear." He, meaning Obama, said, "I don't believe people should be able to own guns." Here's the latest developments on the two biggest items that could change our world, a Middle East war and an economic collapse. First, the coming war. Barack Obama announced today new U.S. sanctions against Iran's energy, petrochemical, and financial sectors. I don't know if he and his advisors have ever read history books, but economic sanctions always lead to war. So that's no surprise that Iran's central bank governor said today that the new U.S. sanctions are no less than a military war that requires new tactics to overcome the new sanctions. And U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta is in Israel meeting with Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak. He denied reports that he was there to discuss military attack plans against Iran. Mr. Panetta would only say that the two men would discuss various contingencies. Prime Minister Netanyahu said in an interview with Israel's Channel 2 television that he hasn't made a decision yet on whether to attack Iran. He said that Israel cannot count on anyone else when it comes to the Iranian threat. Although the Prime Minister said he hasn't made a final decision on attacking Iran, he did say that he is committed to not allowing Israel to come under an Iranian atomic threat. Mr. Netanyahu was asked about reports that Israeli Defense Force Chief General Benny Gantz opposes a unilateral Israeli strike on Iran, which means going alone without the USA's active participation. The Prime Minister replied that in Israel, political leaders make decisions about war and military leaders carry out the orders. Meanwhile, Mr. Gantz was questioned by reporters at an Israeli army induction base about Mr. Netanyahu's comments, and he said regarding Iran, all options are on the table. And Turkish newspapers reported that a convoy of 20 Turkish army vehicles transporting troops, missile batteries, and armored vehicles was spotted moving toward the Syrian border. Eyewitnesses said the convoy of trucks and buses left a major highway, and it was stationed along the frontier with Syria. WorldNet Daily's Aaron Klein said a Russian intelligence officer told him that U.S. troops are in Turkey near the Syrian border. The Russians observed American forces taking part in Turkish military measures to secure the border. So let's recap this. The U.S. imposed new sanctions on Iran. Iran said the sanctions are an act of war. Defense Secretary Panetta is meeting with Israeli Defense Minister Barak, but they're not talking about war. Prime Minister Netanyahu says he hasn't made up his mind about attacking Iran, but he's made up his mind that Iran will never have a nuclear bomb. Israel's top officer is against going to war, but he said all options are on the table. Turkey is moving troops and weapons to its border with Syria, and the Russians are spotting American troops helping the Turks get the weapons and troops to the border with Syria. You got it? Okay. Now, on the economic front, near bankrupt Greece will run out of money by August. Well, by the end of August, a $4 billion note is due on August 20th, and Athens doesn't have the money to pay for it. The deputy finance minister said cash reserves are almost zero. Former Bank of England Governor John Grove told a monetary policy forum in London today that the British government must prepare contingency plans to nationalize the banking system if the euro currency collapses. And he asked, if you think Europe is going down the plug hole, who's next? And I wouldn't want to be in India today. One half of the country's 1.2 billion people are without electrical power after 3 power grids tripped in quick succession. A government official blamed residents in 3 states for using more power than they were allotted. He said, they shall be punished. So that comment should give you an idea of what life will be like after Barry Soetoro, the Marxist, nationalizes the American power grid. So you voted against me. Oh, that state shall be punished. Oh, so you're opposed to Obamacare. We'll take care of that. You won't have any electricity. That's the way it works when governments get too much power. You're listening to True News. This is the voice of the Christian resistance to Obama's communist revolution. We're going to take a break, and when I come back, Dr. Paul Kengor will be here to talk about his book, The Communist, which is a fantastic new book exposing what Frank Marshall Davis believed, who he was, and why that's important to us today. Davis was a member of the Communist Party USA. He was tracked by the FBI in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. He was Obama's mentor. He shaped Obama's mind. This is the man Obama looks up to, a known communist. Then later in the program, General Jerry Boykin, one of the very first members of the Delta team and a commander of the Green Berets, and he was a commander there in Somalia during Mogadishu, that horrible event. He will be here later in the program to talk about Obama's socialist communist agenda and what the Christians in America need to do to stop it now. You're listening to True News.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
You can always count on the promises found in the Bible because God and His principles are unchanging. Here's today's Moment with Charles Stanley.
The Scripture says, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God shall stand forever. Oftentimes people question that, but the reason they do is because they don't understand what that verse means. And that is that no matter what happens in life, God's eternal principles will not change and will not fade. They will always be there. We will be governed by them no matter what. We violate His commands, we suffer the consequences. We follow His commands, we get blessed in the process. And so all of us who have been saved by His grace and love and mercy, we have the Holy Spirit living on the inside of us. And you and I have the awesome privilege of practicing these principles that God has given us in His Word. And one of the most comforting, reassuring attributes of God is this, that He is faithful to His Word. And so what we have to remember is this, while everything else around us change, this book does not change. Principles don't change. You can violate them, as we said, but you cannot change the principles of God because God does not change. He is the eternal one who rules and reigns over everything. Therefore, when you and I come to live out the Christian life, how are we to live it out? We're to live it out by his principles.
You can learn how to begin the Christian life when you visit us at intouch.org and click All Things Are New.
Well, you are listening to True News, the voice of the Christian resistance to Barack Obama's communist revolution. The U.S. leftist news media has worked overtime for 4 years to conceal from the American public the truth about Barry Soetoro's past. A key influential figure in Obama's early life was Frank Marshall Davis, a radical revolutionary that we have talked about for years. When the street hustler wrote his autobiography, well, I should say when communist Bill Ayers ghost wrote it for him, Mr. Obama, or whatever his real name is, affectionately referred to his boyhood mentor in Hawaii, a man simply identified as Frank. Mr. Obama cleverly never identified dear old Frank. But my good friends Cliff Kincaid and Trevor Loudon, however, did out Frank as none other than Frank Marshall Davis. Mr. Davis was a member of the Communist Party USA. 4 years later, the national news media continues the cover-up. Imagine if we discovered that Mitt Romney's boyhood mentor was a member of the Nazi Party or the KKK. Do you think that CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post would ignore it? There is only one explanation. The executives of the national news organizations are complicit in the cover-up of a communist agent in the White House. Fortunately, Dr. Paul Kengor has delved deeply into the history of the Obama-Davis relationship. He recently published a book, The Communist, The Untold Story of Barack Obama's Mentor. I downloaded a copy on my Kindle, and I encourage you to buy a copy too and show it to everybody you meet. Dr. Kengor is a professor at Grove City College. His previous books include The Crusader, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of Communism, also The Dupes, How America's Adversaries Have Manipulated Progressives for a Century. Dr. Kengor, welcome back to True News.
Hey, Rick. Good to be back.
Yes, sir. Let's start with a 1947 quote from the man Barack Obama said shaped his young life. Frank Marshall Davis said in 1947, "I admire Russia for wiping out an economic system which permitted a handful of rich to exploit and beat gold from millions of plain people. As one who believes in freedom and democracy for all, I honor the Red Nation." This is the President of the United States mentor?
Yeah, I mean, this guy, and the title of the book, The Communist, is about Frank Marshall Davis, and I should say I don't call Obama a communist. I don't call him a communist agent or anything like that. I mean, I
do.
Think Obama,
I do.
So just to
I'll do it
clarify.
for you. Yeah, I'll do it for you. All right.
But I think there's no question that that this man who influenced him, mentored him, and I think it's definitely fair to call Davis a mentor. Mentored Obama throughout the 1970s, and Frank Marshall Davis was unquestionably an actual party member. He was a literal card-carrying communist. In the book, in fact, on the cover of the book, we publish his Communist Party number, which was 47544. We include documents in the back from the FBI file. You mentioned Cliff Kincaid. Rick, in fact, I know you know this. Cliff Kincaid posted Frank Marshall Davis's 600-page FBI file up on his website like 4 years ago.
That's right. And we interviewed him about it, and still the media never touched the story.
Yeah, never touched it. And I mean, you've got biographers like David Marinis and David Remnick, John Meacham, who's written a number of different things about Obama, and they'll mention Davis, and they portray him as a stoic, civil rights crusading progressive liberal who was hounded by McCarthyites for their unfair accusations of communism. Gee, just go to Google and type in Frank Marshall Davis. One of the first things that pops up are Cliff's FBI files, 600 pages.
So how do we explain the leftist news media in America refusing to admit that Davis was an official member of the Communist Party?
Yeah, well, they're doing it to protect Obama. I mean, that's all there is to it. And I mean, you are spot on. If Mitt Romney had a mentor who had been a Nazi sympathizer, a member of the KKK, and gee, not even at that level, somebody who was a member of the John Birch Society, I mean, that'd be it. They'd use that to destroy him. I mean, how long ago was it, Rick? About a month ago, we spent 2 weeks dealing with a Washington Post expose on Mitt Romney bullying somebody, supposedly.
As a high school student, he held the boy down and cut his hair.
Yeah. Well, how about instead an actual president who, as a high school student, had a mentor who was not only a Communist Party member, but had been called before the Senate Judiciary Committee in December 1956 for his quote-unquote Soviet activities. That same Democratic-led Senate, Democratic-led committee, a year later in 1957, published a report with the title Scope of Soviet Activity in the United States, unquote, where they listed Davis as an identified member of the Communist Party. That same mentor has a 600-page FBI file, which also includes the fact, and this is an amazing thing, that Davis was listed on the federal government's security index, meaning that he could be immediately arrested if a war broke out between the U.S. and the USSR. I think that maybe that president's mentor in the 70s or actions in the 70s might merit at least maybe a Washington Post article.
Well, don't hold your breath. You'll turn blue because they're never going to mention it. No way.
No, they're not. No, and in fact, I quote in the book a David Marinas piece that he wrote for the Washington Post in August 2008, and it was on Obama's period in Hawaii. It's a huge article. It's like 10,000 words. It prints out to like 17 pages. And there's no mention in there of Davis's communist past or anything like that.
But even the Rupert Murdoch-owned Fox News channel won't go there.
Yeah, they're afraid of it. Now, I must say, to be fair, the O'Reilly Factor, they're going to have me on next Monday.
No kidding.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised. And
this would be interesting to see how O'Reilly treats you.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be very interesting. And Lou Dobbs on Fox Business Channel had me on last night. Lou Dobbs is, I think, much more bold and willing to go there. I think with
he's been fired. He's been fired a couple times, so it doesn't bother him now.
Well, that's right. That's a good point. That's right. And I think, Rick, with O'Reilly, he's probably willing to have me on because I don't call Obama a communist. I don't go into stuff like whether Frank Marshall Davis was Obama's real father. I stuck strictly to the ideology, the politics, the writings of Davis. All that other stuff is shocking, disturbing. And I came across it many times writing the book and just shook my head and said, wow.
Yeah, if we just stick with the fact that Obama partially acknowledges him as his mentor, then just focus on what does it mean to be a mentor and what did Obama's mentor believe in? What did he espouse?
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about what did Frank Marshall Davis believe?
Yeah, man, he... That's what really convinced me of the need to do a book. I mean, I read this guy's columns from the Chicago Star from 1946 to 48, which was the Communist Party publication in Chicago. He was the actual founding editor-in-chief, executive editor. He also wrote a weekly column for the Chicago Star. So that was from 1946 to 48. He left that to go to Hawaii to write for the Honolulu Record from 1949 to 57. That was the Communist Party publication there. And it was controlled by the Communist-controlled union, the ILWU. Harry Bridges Union, and he's an old communist who Nancy Pelosi hails as this wonderful progressive of all things. But when you read these columns, Rick, I mean, you've got this man who's bashing the rich and Wall Street and corporate fat cats and the wealthy for not paying their fair share. The Chicago Star, you open it up in 1947, you got headlines like, GOP tax plan spares the rich, benefits millionaires. He's calling for...
Well, wait a minute. This sounds like Obama in 2012.
It does. It really does. He's calling for taxpayer funding of universal health care, taxpayer funding of public works projects to get America out of a Great Depression, on and on and on and on.
Wait a minute. We elected Frank Marshall Davis.
Yeah. It's in some respects, yeah. It's really a remarkable thing, and I mean. I'm trying to be as fair and open-minded on this as I possibly can. I suppose that one could say, okay, look, these are commonalities among sort of fellow travelers on the political left. Okay, there are liberals and leftists and progressives and socialists who, like communists, favor wealth redistribution, workers' rights, some forms of collectivism, some forms of nationalization. But when you look at this list, Davis bashing General Motors, attacking Winston Churchill. I mean, a big controversy this week about Obama sending the bust of Winston Churchill out of the White House. He did that.
The very first thing he did when he went into the Oval Office, he boxed it up and shipped it back. Why? Because his father, Barack Obama Sr., despised the British people. He despised Winston Churchill. So Obama simply, he did that in honor of his dad.
Well, that's right. And there was, I don't know if you saw it this week, but Dan Pfeiffer, the White House communications guy, wrote a blog post at the White House claiming that this is all a right-wing myth, that the bust wasn't actually sent out. And he specifically went after Charles Krauthammer, and Krauthammer responded. And it turns out that the bust was sent out of the Oval Office. The really interesting thing about this is, as they were debating back and forth what actually happened with the bust, was it really sent out or not? My point, I emailed with a few different people on this, and I said, look, the more important point is you've got to understand it wouldn't be surprising if Obama didn't like Churchill. On the colonialism point alone, you could see Obama not liking Churchill. And I wrote this to a couple different liberals who I was arguing with on this issue. This is what you guys need to understand here. You're arguing about whether or not the bust was sent out. The more important question is, does Obama like Churchill, and why wouldn't he like Churchill? And that gets to the roots, really, of the kind of president that we're dealing with, the ideology.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of people, when they think about Obama's autobiography, they think the title is "Dreams from My Father," but it's Dreams of My Father,
right?
But it's not. It's Dreams from My Father. He didn't write a book saying dreams about my father. He said, no, dreams from my father. Well, okay, now I got to find out, what did his father dream about? His father dreamed about the destruction of capitalism, the destruction of Britain, the destruction of America. That's what his father dreamed about.
Yeah, there was the book by
Dinesh.
By Dinesh D'Souza.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, couldn't spit it out. And Dinesh's book, and also the film 2016, Obama's America. And Dinesh was criticized by people including by people on the right of all things, for this. It's saying that these are the dreams of Obama's father from his. And as Dinesh pointed out, look, the title of the memoir is "Dreams from My Father."
Yes.
Just look at the title. It tells you what you need to know. And also, Rick, Barack Obama's father, Barack Sr., he and Barack's mother, Ann Dunham, Stanley Ann Dunham, her real name is actually Stanley. She's just named after her grandfather, Stanley Ann Dunham. Obama's parents met in a Russian language class. at the University of Hawaii in the fall of 1960.
Now, how many Americans were studying Russian in 1960?
I mean, not many. So here you have the father, the mother, and then Stanley Dunham, a grandfather sort of the left, that he's the one that introduced Obama to Frank Marshall Davis in the first place for the purpose of mentoring, as the black male father figure, role model, mentor that Obama was lacking in his own father. So you've got all, and by the way, Stanley Dunham would drink with Frank Marshall Davis, play Scrabble with him, cards with him. According to one eyewitness, Donna Weatherly Williams, they would even smoke dope together. So picture two men in their 60s on Social Security smoking pot together. So all of this political dysfunction, that's what raised Barack Obama.
And he was I was talking about Davis. He was a porn writer.
Right, he was.
A lot of the stuff he wrote was just vile pornography.
He did. He wrote a book, a fictional work, which appears to be autobiographical, to some degree. Joel Gilbert, who's done this documentary, Dreams from My Real Father, he now has even more documentation from Frank Marshall Davis writing to people about writing that book. And it's at the least, that book is a form of soft porn. And one of his hobbies was photographing nude women, which he did do. And we've all seen these photographs that are out there on the web of allegedly of Obama's mother. And I first saw these 4 years ago, and this is something that Fox News and mainstream talk radio won't even talk about. They won't even talk about.
You're talking about the nude pornographic photos.
Yeah, and I've seen them, and I didn't deal with them in the book. I stuck to the politics and ideology that I know, but I would implore people on the left, just think about this. Be honest with yourselves. Be honest with me. You see those things, and it's very disturbing, and you've got to look at that and say, this is not good. This is very troubling.
Dr. Kengor, are you telling me you've never seen the nude photographs of George Washington's mother?
No, never saw those. No, not of Washington's mother, not of Reagan's mother or Clinton's mother or the Bush's moms, and none of that stuff. Imagine that. Yeah, this is quite unprecedented what we have here, and this was. Here again, I would lay a lot of the blame for liberals who are listening and angry at us. Look, a lot of this is your fault. You didn't vet this. You didn't put this information out there to begin with, and then you leave it to guys like us.
Paul, listen to me, please. I know you don't want to say this. They're commies. We have been taken over, Dr. Kengor. We are in a communist takeover. It's over. The communists have taken over the country.
Well, what I think is that there's been a long time alliance between communists and liberals. We talked about my last book, Dupes. I think liberals and progressives don't realize when they're being used by communists. I think that's been the problem. I mean, they don't understand that these communists who have used them and targeted them, including like Frank Marshall Davis, these guys aren't their friends. And they don't understand that when guys like us are blowing the whistle on the real communists, that we're actually identifying a real enemy that's using the liberals. Mm-hmm. Whittaker Chambers, I quoted him in the beginning of my last book, Dupes, and he talks about how communists looked at liberals and progressives as sort of prey. They laughed at these people, like, how could you guys be so gullible? We're going to use you. And that's the danger. Look, the whole birth certificate thing, they could have stopped all of that 4 years ago if Obama would have said what he said, 2 years ago? Now the issue is still out there.
Yeah, because he posted a fake birth certificate, and they wouldn't even analyze it. I mean, within an hour after that thing went on the White House website, I had listeners contacting me, people who were graphic artists and designers, and they were saying, this is a joke. It's in layers.
Well, the amazing thing about it is that merely by responding, as the Obama administration finally did, the mainstream media totally accepted the explanation, and that pretty much ended the debate, at least in the mainstream media, and even mainstream Fox News, talk radio, conservative sources. So with a lot of this, if they would have, back to Frank Marshall Davis. Imagine if 4 years ago they would have just come out, Washington Post, New York Times, whoever, and said the obvious. Look, this guy in Dreams from My Father that Obama talks about, Frank, was an actual Communist Party member. And you know what else, Rick? They could have asked Obama about it. You know what Obama would have said? He would have said, yeah, I talk about him in there. He was an influence in my life, no question about it. And I do know about his disturbing past, but hey, guys, come on. I'm no closet card-carrying member of the Communist Party, right? And that would have been the end of it. That would have been the and even with my book now, they could respond to it. They could undercut it just by saying that. But instead, they ignore this stuff altogether, and then try to portray anybody who shows any interest in it as a kook.
Well, I'm not going to stop, and I'm going to continue to tell everybody that I can possibly tell that there is a communist in the White House, and I encourage our audience. We've got a huge, vast audience all over the world, and you can buy this book right now. It's at Amazon. It's in the bookstores. It's called The Communist, The Untold Story of Barack Obama's Mentor. The author is Dr. Paul Kengor. And folks, listen, buy a copy, carry it with you, take it to work, show it to the people you work with, show it to people, where you get gasoline. Take it. Carry that thing under your arm. Show it to people. If we had 1 million people carrying that book around every day, just showing people, saying, hey, did you know that Barack Obama's mentor was a member of the Communist Party? That's what you can do. And just get a copy of the book and use it as a tool. Dr. Kengor, thank you. You've done a great job in this, and we appreciate all the research and the work that you've put into this book.
Well, thanks, Rick. And remember, my communist in the communist is Frank Marshall Davis.
Reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ, you're listening to True News, the End Time Newscast.
Well, welcome back to segment 3 of True News, the voice of the Christian resistance to the communist revolution. In the first interview, we heard Dr. Paul Kengor talk about Barry Soetoro's Marxist Communist mentor, Frank Marshall Davis, the member of the Communist Party that the national news media will not mention. In this next segment, we'll hear from a decorated American soldier who knows a lot about communist infiltration and takeover tactics and terminology. Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin was one of the original members of the U.S. Army's Delta Force. He commanded all the Green Berets as well as the Special Warfare Center and School. He served a tour with the CIA, and later in his career, he served as Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. He is the author of the book Never Surrender, and he's the co-founder of Kingdom Warriors. His websites are jerryboykin.com and kingdomwarriors.net. General Boykin, glad to have you back on True News.
Hey, it's good to be back on True News. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. General, we just had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Paul Kengor, and I respect him a lot. He's been a guest on the program many times over the year. He's got this brand new book called The Communist, where he's done some great research into Frank Marshall Davis, a man that we've talked about on this program for 4 years. And clearly he was identified by the FBI in the 1940s and 50s as a member of the Communist Party and a very pro-Soviet agent in this country. With all respect to Dr. Kengor, he's not willing to go as far as I am and just say that Barack Obama is a Marxist communist. You think I'm going too far?
No, I don't think you're going too far. I think it's time for Americans to realize that there is a cabal of people in this nation that have been here for a long time that would call themselves socialist, but at the end of the day, they are very much following the dictates of Karl Marx and his manifesto, the Communist Manifesto. And maybe some of them don't even think of themselves as being communist, but at the end of the day, that's what they are, because they're following a Marxist model. Now, if you look at the realities of our current president, not only was he mentored by Frank Marshall Davis, but his father was a hardcore Marxist. His brother and cousin, Odinga and Roy, are hardcore Marxists. He replaced a woman in the Illinois Senate that was a hardcore Marxist. He was endorsed by Barry Sanders, who is an avowed Marxist. He calls himself socialist, but he's a Marxist in the end. So, and the evidence goes on. His association with people like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn. What other conclusion can you draw just from those associations and the fact that without a father in the home, he was influenced by those people for most of his life. So, what else can you conclude?
That's right. Well, the old saying, birds of a feather flock together. And in this case with Mr. Obama, all the feathers that are flocking together, they're all Marxist communists. And so
that's exactly right.
Let's just be open and honest about it. This is what we've been saying on the air. I told people in 2007 and 2008 when the guy was running, I said the guy is a Marxist, and if he gets in this country, he will begin a systematic program to destroy, to dismantle the America we have known. And this man has done tremendous damage in 4 years. I can only, in my worst nightmare, think of what he could accomplish in another 4 years. But I think, General, one reason that he's gotten away with so much is the inability of conservatives, and certainly the Republican Party, which is just a bunch of neutered puppies. They can't comprehend. Americans can't comprehend. They can't fathom the idea that a Marxist revolutionary could lie his way into the White House and begin by stealth a campaign to dismantle the constitutional republic. That sounds so far removed from reality that the conservatives in this country can't bring themselves to saying it openly.
Yeah, let me suggest that the people that don't believe that, go back and read a book that was written in 1958 called The Naked Communist.
I had that book.
Yeah, well, it lays out exactly what their agenda is, what they intend to do in America, and when you read that and realize it was written in 58, and then you look at what they have actually done, you've got to get beyond thinking that it can't happen here. The fact of the matter is they've accomplished most of their objectives in America, and I think that they see the end coming, and this is the Messiah. It's taken them, a long time in this country to be able to get this kind of people in positions of authority. It's not just the president. I mean, it's others that are around him. I mean, look at the Attorney General. Look at his closest advisor, David Axelrod. He's part of that cabal of people, and they have
Valerie Jarrett.
Valerie Jarrett, and they're funded by George Soros and other like-minded Marxists. So don't say it can't happen in America, and it is happening in America. And by the way, look at Europe. I think the Europeans are a good example of how it can happen in this country.
I've talked privately, and I've had them on the program as guests over the years, various people that lived in countries that were overtaken by the communists. And every single one of them says what's happening in America is frightening to them. They came to America to escape communism, and they can't believe that in their old age, America is going communist. And we're repeating the very same things that they saw in their home country. Just a few months ago, I had a Cuban-American patriot on, and as a young man, as a teenager, he joined Castro's communist army. He was a guide to Che Guevara. He actually led Guevara through the jungles of Cuba, and he believed the whole revolutionary thing. But he said Castro never told anybody he was a communist until he was firmly entrenched in power. Then he revealed himself as a communist. And this man said, General, he said, this is what's happening right now in the United States.
That's right. I just did a documentary called Behold a Pale Horse with Charlie Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an old lady from Romania there. She's probably in her mid to late 70s, and she's in the documentary, and she talks about how the various things the communists did is they took over Romania. I was just with her in Houston about 3 weeks ago, and as I departed to go to the airport, and she departed to go home, she looked at me with tears in her eyes, and she said, tell them what's happening. Make them understand what's happening to America. So, the people that have been through this, they see very clearly what most Americans do not see, and that is that we're becoming a Marxist nation very quickly.
So what do we do?
Well, we got to get informed. We've got to stop using the mainstream media as our only source of information, because you're not going to get this from them. Got to find other sources of information, and there are many. And your previous caller and his writings and things are good sources of information. But there's many sources of information to find out about this. And in fact, I would suggest that your listeners get a video that was done by a guy that was a former member of the Idaho State Legislature, and get a copy of his.
Is it the grinding of America?
Yeah, it's called Agenda: Grinding America Down.
Yes, Agenda: Grinding America Down.
Right, just Agenda, and then subtitle: Grinding America Down.
General, what are you hearing privately among other retired military officers?
Well, there are some who are as concerned as I am, and not only that, are willing to get involved in what's going on, and they see exactly the same thing. People like General Paul Vallely.
Yes, sir.
He's working very hard to protect the to protect the Constitution of the United States. And a document and took an oath years ago saying that he would support and defend the Constitution, and there was no expiration date on that. And there are others. Ace Lyons, a former admiral, he's very concerned about it. And I see a number, but I will tell you also that I'm somewhat saddened that there aren't more of our retired general officers and flag officers that are not only recognizing where America's going, but that are willing to take a stand on.
What's your thoughts about the way Obama has legitimized homosexual behavior inside the military?
This is going to destroy the military. Now, everybody says, okay, we've had a year now of this, and our military is still functioning. Well, yeah, it is. And but if you think that it's something that's going to destroy our military in a year's time, no. But in a decade, you won't know our military. See, the military has one mission, and that is to fight and win wars. That's all, period. And unless you can demonstrate that changes in the military are going to enhance their ability to do just that, fight and win the nation's wars, you should not make those changes. And what this administration has done, it has put the military right in the middle of a culture war, and they're exploiting the military for those reasons.
Okay, now recently the Pentagon changed the rules, and they said that homosexual soldiers can march in gay pride parades wearing the military uniform. And the first thing that I said when I heard that, General, I said, well, I wonder what General Boykin thinks about this, because some years ago, you were in there was an uproar about you because you were giving speeches in Christian churches and you were wearing your army uniform, and they wanted your head on a platter. So it's yeah. Go ahead.
I went through a 9-month investigation over that, by the way, and most recently, of course, I was asked to withdraw from a talk I was going to give at West Point because several atheist groups, as well as Council of American Islamic Relations, protested. So, the military was willing to ask me not to come and speak about faith. But then Panetta turns around and allows them to march in a gay pride parade in uniform. And I will tell you that it's on the books that is unauthorized. It is on the books. So what Panetta has done is wavered the military regulations to permit this.
Well, a little Leon Panetta, he's got some Marxist relationships in his closet too. If you go back far enough, Mr. Panetta he's palled around with known communists.
That's right. He certainly has, and as have a number of the people that are in the administration right now. And it's a time for us to take this seriously and realize, we criticize Joe McCarthy, and we talk about McCarthyism and all that. But, the fact of the matter was, when you look back, McCarthy was not that far off.
I think he was McCarthy, a great American.
Yeah. He recognized that there was a serious threat. Most Americans didn't take it seriously. McCarthy did, and he had the guts, the courage to stand up and say, we've got to stop this. I wish that we could find a McCarthy-like individual today that was willing to stand up and proclaim very boldly that we do have a problem with a Marxist cabal in America, which are now in powerful positions, influencing our policies and the direction of our country.
Well, General, why don't you seek the nomination of the Constitution Party and run for president?
Well, you know what? I do what God calls me to do, and when I step outside of that, I always get in trouble. You see, I'm like most men. I hear God's voice, I answer, and then when He doesn't tell me what to do, I go do it on my own, and I always get in trouble. And He's not called me to run for office.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Mitt Romney is strong enough to defeat Barack Obama?
Well, I think that it's not Mitt Romney as much as it is the current climate and the current situation in America. This cabal, this Marxist cabal, will pull out all stops. They will do everything they have to do to keep their Messiah in office. And God bless them. I wish that we had more conservatives, particularly more Christians, that were as committed and in unity as are these Marxists. And they will do all they can, but I think the conditions and the situation in America will have far more to do with the election than will the two individuals that are running. Romney was not my choice, but I am 100% behind Romney at this point because the alternative is, I believe, disastrous for America.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I said I didn't think Mr. Romney was strong enough, I wasn't speaking negatively of him. I was referring to what you just said. These Marxist communists will do anything. They will not give up power. They will fight with everything they've got, and that's why I was saying I don't know if Mr. Romney is prepared for what is going to come at him and the tactics that they're going to use. These people are they lust for power, and this is the first time in the history of this republic that they've had this much power. And I don't see them going out without a horrific fight. I'm concerned, General, that regardless of what happens in the election, Mr. Obama, between November and January, may create a scene in this country that he has the justification to declare martial law.
Well, I think that's a very real possibility, and I will be very honest with you. The situation in America could be such that martial law is actually warranted. And that situation, in my view, could occur if we have an economic collapse. Now, this is, the dam is just about to break on our economy. And I think when it does, there's going to be a major disruption of the distribution of food. And I think what you'll see, particularly in the inner cities, is you will see a riotous, civil unrest that ultimately might justify martial law. I think those people that are not in the major cities are going to be far better off, but it could actually justify martial law. And I'm praying that we will not see that kind of collapse. We will not see a disruption of the distribution of food in America. That's probably the single biggest problem. If people can eat, they can survive for some period of time while we, get through the economic crisis and, reestablish currency and systems and all that. But if they can't eat, they're going to fight, and that's my big concern.
That's right. And when your buddies are members of the Nation of Islam or the Black Panther Party or any other, or Occupy Wall Street, it only takes a few phone calls to stir trouble.
Well, that's exactly right. And, this, by the way, you mentioned Occupy Wall Street. Now, that is right out of the Marxist playbook.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wonder why Soros and the union leadership have been funding and supporting the Occupy movement, you need to recognize that it's because that is the Marxist model. Occupy Wall Street. Class warfare. Divide the nation into two classes, and then they clash. And ultimately, the proletariat overcomes the bourgeoisie, and you then you have a successful Marxist revolution. That's Occupy is right out of the playbook.
That's right. So going back to this, the possibility, and it's a real possibility of an economic crisis because of what's happening in Europe right now. If the European banks go under sometime after September 12, seems to be the crunch time for a lot of things in Europe. If the European banking system collapses and it moves across the Atlantic into the United States in October, and all indication is, Israel's going to war with Iran sometime October, November, and if we have blowback here in the United States through Hezbollah or other sleeper cells, as you say, those kind of circumstances would warrant martial law. So here's the problem, General. We're going to be playing right into Obama's hands because he's going to say, what do you want me to do? I'm trying to restore order. So what are people like you and I going to do when Mr. Obama has declared martial law?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think it's a matter of us playing into his hands. I think it's a matter of he and quite frankly, the previous administration as well have brought about this situation. Now, I think the previous administration, it was just malfeasance. And this administration, it's very deliberate to bring about that kind of situation. But what are we going to do? And I would tell you that for me, I have 3 months of food stored. I have lots of other essentials that I have stored in my home, and my wife and I are preparing for this. Now, a lot of people call us, foolish for that kind of attitude, but I would tell you that I'm not going to be unprepared, and I think people need to be prepared now for some disruption. This economic collapse is a very strong possibility, and we need to get ready for it, and we need to be thinking through and developing plans for how we're going to react.
Well, I would say to any scoffers that if I heard a retired lieutenant general who was one of the original members of Delta Force, commanded the Green Berets, and was Deputy Undersecretary of Military Intelligence, say that he was preparing and storing food, I would take that as a real serious warning. I wouldn't dismiss that kind of advice. And I think, General, you're doing what the vast majority of our radio audience has done. They are preparing for this.
That's right. And I think that's because so many of your listeners are people of faith. I think that, our faith includes a certain discernment. It's one of the gifts of being a Christian. It's a spiritual gift to have discernment, and I think that it's prudent to discern that we have major problems, which could get worse, and which, unless there's some very strong leadership in the country, will get worse. And the logical conclusion to our current economic crisis is a meltdown.
One final question. I know you've been traveling around the country speaking in churches now that you're retired and they can't gripe about it. What is the current awareness level in the churches that you're visiting? Are they coming out of their coma and waking up and realizing we've got problems?
Yeah, I think, I'm glad you asked that question, and I do speak all over the country. Let me say to you and to your audience, there is a third great awakening coming to America, and I believe that pastors are waking up. I believe that parishioners, Christians all over the country are waking up and realizing that they have to get involved. I think they've realized now that they just cannot sit on the sideline anymore, that they have to be an influence, as the church was in the early history of America. The church was very influential. I think they're waking up. I will tell you that the most fundamental thing they can do is pray for America. And I mean sincerely pray, and pray for forgiveness for what we've become. And the second most important thing they can do is get out and vote. And if you don't vote, you have no right to complain.
My guest, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. The website, jerryboykin.com and kingdomwarriors.net. General, thank you. Appreciate all that you're doing.
Enjoyed being with you. God bless you.
You're listening to True News, the End Time Newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
This is Max McLean. Did you know that because we have been forgiven, we have the right to appeal directly to God? Listen to the Bible from Hebrews 10. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart, in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. From Hebrews 10. Listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
Hear more at radiobible.org.
My most sincere appreciation goes out to our generous True News audience for the outpouring of financial support. Everything was paid on time, all the bills paid. And let's give all the praise and glory and honor to Jesus Christ, who is faithful to those who trust in his name. I want to close from the book of Isaiah, chapter 41. The poor and needy seek water, but there is none. Their tongues fail for thirst. I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open rivers in desolate places and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. I will plant in the wilderness the cedar and the acacia tree, the myrtle and the oil tree. I will set in the desert the cypress tree and the pine and the box tree together, that they may see and know, and consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord has done this, and the Holy One of Israel has created it. Praise the Lord. Glory to Jesus Christ.